In this video, we're looking at references for 3D modeling, creating turnaround so that we can model something from a front view, from a side view, or from a top view as is appropriate for the item that we need to model. To begin with, I'm just looking at the concept art and it's all sitting as I want to display it. So rather than mess around with this, because I'll need to create room in my panel here for alternative views of this concept art, I'm going to make a duplicate copy of this Photoshop document, and then I'm going to edit the duplicate so that I always have a copy that's sitting well laid out here and has my details regarding the textures and the painting and all of that. You can see looking down the right hand side here that there are a lot of layers involved, and I haven't gone ahead and merged a lot of them, so I can do that in the new project. And if I ever want to come back and edit something in the overview concept art, I can always come back and do that if I have a duplicate copy. So now that I have my duplicate scene, I'm just going to go and clean up some of these files here. I'm going to merge what it needs merged, I'm going to hide what needs hidden, and just get this set up ready to add the reference images in. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up some guides so that I can project across if I was to do a side view of this drawing. So normally what I would do is I would get the concept art, I would move it to one side, and then I would get guidelines. To get the guidelines, we need to turn the rulers on. So we go to View, and then down to Rulers, and click that, and you'll see your rulers pop on. You'll also see that Control and R will work as a shortcut to turn those off and on. So if I go to my top ruler and I click and drag down, you'll see I get a guideline. And I can set those at some of the extremities or some of the interesting points, like the top of the well, the bottom of the well, where the ground level of this is, where the bottom of this base is, maybe where the top of these hands, the level should be, where the bottom of the kind of spiked arms are, or roughly thereabouts. And then what I can do is project across, and I could start over here to draw in a new layer what this might look like from a side view. So I'm just going to quickly go ahead and draw what that might look like. Here's a very sketchy look at what your side view could look like in terms of some of the details in that. Now, one thing that you may realize is this tells me nothing new. I could already guess the position of the hand because the level of the hand is the same as it was before, and the position of the spikes that are in the middle haven't really changed. The position of the well here in the center hasn't really changed. The shape of the ground hasn't really changed, and that's because this is essentially a round object. So I'm looking at this side on. What I really need to be doing is projecting up this way and figuring out what the top view of this looks like so that I can get a circular view of the top, and I can work out things like how wide the well is compared to the radius of the rest of the ground, whereabouts everything is in relation to itself, whether or not these hands are perfectly in line with the arms of these kind of like spiked arms, or whether they are offset so that they're on the off positions there, whereabouts the rocks that I've got here actually sit in space. So essentially what I need is a map view. It's a top-down view. So in Maya, this would be the front view, this would be the side view, and this little bit here that I've just drawn will be the top view. That's the top view that we need. So now it's a good time to look at deleting the image that I don't need for a start. And now I have these guides, and I want to clear these guides. If I go to the Move tool, you'll see that I can select the guides. One way to clear all guides would be to go to View, and then View and then Clear Guides. Okay, and that will clear all of the guides that are there. Another way would have been, if I have a couple of guides here, I can click on the guide and I can drag it out of the canvas and let go, or I can drag it off the bottom of the canvas and let go. Or if I had one to the side here, I could click and I could drag it out to the side of my canvas and let go. And it doesn't just move them off screen, it deletes them. So that's how you delete individual guides, or how you move the guides, or clear all of the guides. Again, View, and then New Guide or Clear Guide will control them. So I've got space to the right of my image, but I need space above this image to get this map view that I'm going to draw, this top-down view. So to do that, there's two options for me here whenever I go into the image panel. There's image size and canvas size. Image size is not what we want to choose, and I'll show you why. If I change the height up to double, which would be 2160, you'll see if I hit press OK, it stretches my artwork up. That's definitely not what I want. So I don't want to change the image size. I want to change the size of the canvas that the image is on. Now, if you have a version of Photoshop before 2020, you would go to Image and Canvas Size, and change it that way. You can change the height and it will increase the height of your canvas. It's a bit different now in in Photoshop 2020, where they now have an artboard system. So if you click into your move tool, you'll see that behind it there's an artboard tool, and this will give us a set of options at the top to edit our artboard. So what I'm going to do is change the height to 2160 here, and that will change my artboard height. And what I can do with the artboard tool is I can click on my edge and I can just drag that edge up and it will give me extra pixels. Okay, so I need quite a lot to be able to fit this in, so I'm just going to keep going here, and you see I'm going to create all of those extra pixels at the top of my page there, and now I can paint those in. I want this all to be grey in the background preferably, so I'm just going to use my paint bucket tool. I'm going to hold Alt to select the colour, Alt and left click on the colour, or you could use your eyedropper tool, I, or you see it here, to choose that colour. Then back to G, my paint bucket tool, and I'm going to just fire that paint in there to make sure it's all the one colour. So now we have that extra space that we can project up to for our second view of this piece of concept art. So I'm just going to set my grid lines up for that now. That should do as some of the main grid lines that will point up my page towards the concept art that's, the reference image that I'm going to be drawing. So to help me out here, I'm going to be using some of the shape tools. The shape tools are hidden behind this little icon here, the line tool. You can use U on your keyboard to select the shape tools. I know that this is going to be roughly circular, so I'm going to choose the ellipse tool. And what I can do there is click down in the corner and hold Shift, and I can create an ellipse. Okay, now at the moment that ellipse is the same color as my background, so I'm going to need to change that color first of all. I'm also going to set this to pixels because I want to be able to edit my pixels directly, I've decided. If you have it set to shape or path, you won't be able to edit your pixels the way you would with paint. So I'm creating a new layer here. I'm going to call that top ground, because it's really the ground that I want to make here. And I'm going to choose a dark grey colour to begin with. So here we go. I'm going to grab the bottom corner, pull up holding Shift to make sure it stays circular, otherwise it would turn into an irregular ellipse, it wouldn't be a circle. And I'm just going to let go there at the edge of my boundaries. And now I have a circle that is the same width as the side view of my concept art. I'm just going to move it up a wee bit, clicking in to use my move tool, and then I can move that up slightly. Okay, so that's looking good, a good position for this. I'm also going to use Alt and scroll to scroll back a wee bit so that I can see both images a little clearer. Now I don't want this to be a perfect circle. It has grass and it's also meant to be like an organic kind of shape. So I'm going to get my eraser tool, and this is why I use pixels and not the shape tool, the shape or the path option of the shape tool, that is. The pixels is the only thing that will allow me to edit this with the eraser or the brush tool. So I'm working away with my eraser here, and I'm just using that to eat into my lines a wee bit. So nature is rarely in completely perfect geometric shapes, so even if you use them as a good kind of design guide, it's always good to cut some of the corners off or to do something that will make it look a little more natural, and then that will be reflected in your modeling as well, and you won't end up with a perfectly circular surface or a perfectly square surface or whatever it is. Now, if you would rather have lines to work to than a shape to work to whenever you're modeling, you can do that very easily through the layer styles. If I double click beside the name of my layer here, so I've just double clicked in space there, I'll bring up the layer style properties. And in there I can change some properties about this top ground layer here. So what I'm going to do is turn on the stroke, and that will allow me to have a stroke right around my object. And I'm going to change the color to black, or whatever color that would stand out easily for you whenever you're modeling. And then I can also do a color overlay here, which will change the color of the center. I'm going to make sure that's set to normal rather than multiply, and then this color will be the raw color that will be drawn in. So one thing that I could do is select the color of the background, and it will look like it is transparent in the center, even though it isn't. Another thing that I could have done is change the opacity right down to 0. And actually that's not changing the opacity of the inner color, it's just changing the opacity of the overlay. So I'll keep that up, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just color pick that background layer, and there you see as we paint, we create automatic. I'm just painting in, I'm going to paint in black here, and you see the color overlay will overwrite that, and it just draws outlines around everything. So it's a really handy way of getting lines if you would rather draw shapes, which I would encourage you to do, instead of actually painting in fine lines. This will get you a really nice uniform line right the way around the thing that you are creating. But whether you use this, or you see I can turn these effects off here in my layer tab by clicking the wee eyeball beside effects, whether you use the shape or whether you use lines, that's a matter of personal preference. So it's totally up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and finish off this reference image. So as you may be able to see, I've actually already encountered a problem from my concept art that won't work whenever I am drawing it, or sorry, when I'm modeling it in Maya, because I've drawn these two kind of like claw sculptures as though they are equidistant apart on this drawing, and there's only 3 of them, so they're meant to be spaced kind of like equally in thirds apart around this circular base. Now the problem is whenever I project that up, if I have one here and I have one across from it over here, you see what that means is that the third one has to be either here or here, and that is really if it was in a square configuration, and there's only 3 of them from my concept. At least that's the way that I had envisioned it being designed. So what I need to do is have them in a kind of triangular shape, not the way that it's kind of been drawn here. So just to show you how I would tackle that problem, I'm going back to my shape tool, and I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm just going to call this triangle for now. Okay, I'm going to draw a triangle that's going to help me to calculate where these should go. So I'm going to use the polygon tool within the U menu there, polygon, key U, and I'm going to change the sides from 5, because it'll draw me a 5-sided shape at the moment, down to 3. Okay, I'm going to change the color to like a darker color, and then I'm going to click from the center of my circle, and I'm going to draw that polygon out from the center there. And let's say these two should really be down like that, so just going to approximate it, let's say there. Okay, so I'll let the triangle point to where they're going to sit, and it looks like that. So now I'm going to use this triangle guide. I'm going to change the opacity down, so that's by clicking on the layer and changing the layer opacity down. I'm just going to use this as a guide to point me in the right direction for where those hands should be. So if I go to draw that on now, they should really be here, here, and here. So you see they're not quite where those hands were projected up, and they're not where I thought they would be on the top view. They're only very slightly off where the guides are, so it's really not so bad, but this triangle tool has helped me to get them exactly where I want to be. And I'm going to use that triangle tool again to get these in the right position as well. So here we have all the main elements of this piece of concept art mapped into a top view, which I'm just going to label top and side view for the sake of presentation. Just using my text tool T here, clicking in the center, and you see I've got this center line, and I'm going to call this top view. Now it's hard to see that, so I'm just going to change the text color here at the top to black, and I'm going to bump up the size of the text on the right here. If you can't see the character menu, go to window and then character. I'm going to bump that up to about 48. I'm going to change the font thickness to bold while I've got that layer selected. And then I can duplicate that layer just to save me time. And then use my move tool, V, up in the top left here, to move that text down. And I'm going to call this one the front view. Great, and they're a little close together, so I could space those out slightly by selecting all of these layers, clicking the bottom one, zooming right up to the top, holding shift, and then I can select all of them, and then I can move all of these layers at once. I can just space them out a wee bit better like that. That's great. I don't need these grid lines anymore. Now I could have drawn the grid lines up with a brush tool, and some people have been doing that. Some people have been using a brush tool and the shift key to draw straight lines up, and that's fine. But these grid lines are really, really handy because I can make them disappear and reappear as I want to. I can go to View, Show, and then Guides, and I can turn those guides off, and then I'm not going to see them again. They won't export out when we save this image out anyway. So I can see from this reference image, this top view, a bunch of different details. I can see the center of the well, which gives me the thickness of these well walls, which I can't see from my side view. I've got the relative distances and plotted points of whereabouts the different elements are going to go, and I've just kind of scattered some rocks in there. And again, you can turn off the lines that I have here in the top ground by clicking on the little effects icon on the right hand side of the layer there, and I can change the effects off, and I will get the shape there, and I could change that shape color if I wanted. But if I double click, I can go in, I can change the color overlay, and I could make that an even lighter color, or whatever you want, whatever's going to work for your reference. I could go in and make it more like, if you want to keep it in keeping with the concept art, you could choose color overlay, grab that color, and then change it more to the kind of green tone. I'm just going to make it a bit lighter so the details stand out on it. Whatever you think works for you, whatever you're going to be able to model on top of and see all of these details while retaining some idea of what the different elements are. So your diorama, your models may be a lot more detailed than this, and therefore this process is going to take you a bit more time and it's going to look a bit more involved. I've chosen something quite simple so that I can keep these tutorials nice and short for you. The last thing that we have to do is save this out. So to do that, I'm going to crop the side of this canvas in, and that'll just tidy up the edges of this. So to do that, I can press C on my keyboard. That is the crop tool up on the left here, and I'm just going to grab the edge of that artboard till it looks like my artwork is centered. I'm going to hit enter to make sure that that is applied, and then file, export. I could quick export as a PNG, and I'm just going to name that top front view fantasy diorama. And when we open that up, there we'll have a neat PNG image that has saved all the details that we need to at least get the position of these elements that are in our diorama. So this bottom one is really for it's a pure concept art. It's to show the positioning of things, it's to show the scale of things, it's to show the textures that are involved and some of the colors. So it's really used as a proof of concept for how the final piece could look. The reference images then, like this top view, are more true to scale. They're things that will be more useful for us to model against in 3D software like Maya and Blender. Now what this concept image in the bottom here isn't that great for will be modeling directly from in Maya, and that's because all of these assets, you can barely see this claw in behind the rocks. Really, I would need to extract each asset individually and create a front, a side, and a top view, or just two views of it to model from. And that's what I'm going to be doing next, is taking some of these individual assets and making reference views for them to use in the 3D modeling software. To finish up, we'll take a quick look at some old concepts of mine and how they show the same use of silhouettes and then bringing them in to use as a front view or a side view and abstracting other views from them. So here you can see I started off with a silhouette that is a side view. I actually started from a Sherman tank silhouette. I then modified that into the silhouette I wanted to use. I projected that up larger, and then I have this tank side view here. And then from the side view, I drew these lines across. This time I actually used the paint tool, the brush tool, to just draw lines across holding shift. And I've cut them off at the end with the eraser. And I've kept them in the background just to show that it's a projection to show the process, rather than using the guides. And from that, I have drawn the front tank copy here that you can see. So I started off with this one, and I projected across and was able to draw this from it to show the width of the tank and some of the other details that you wouldn't be able to see from this side-on view. The next turnaround concept that could be used for modeling is this image. It's a doll from an old Russian kind of fairy tale, and you can see here it looks kind of humanoid. It could be large, like a big shop mannequin. It could be human sized, but I've specified here 70 millimeters as the height. Now this is something that you would do, especially if it could be misunderstood about the scale of something that you're looking at. Put measurement in for at least the height, if not the width. Often in buildings or in vehicles, even in characters, you will have at least a height, and certainly in buildings and vehicles you may have other measurements on them so that we can tell what size they are, even what size they are compared to a human. And finally we have this dragon turnaround. It shows a front view, that was the first one made. It shows a side view, and then a top view was done third. I've also, from the front view sketch, all I did was project lines across and then draw the side view as best I could. Characters are generally more complex, especially whenever they're animals, things with tails, things that have different widths. You know, this creature from this direction could be craning its neck way forwards, but you can see from the side view sketch that its neck goes straight up. So side views are very important in characters and more complex organic shapes. Now, given that doing a top view from this would be quite complicated, what I did was I rotated the front view onto its side here, and I kept the side view as it was. I projected lines down from both, and you can see this created a grid here on the top-down sketch, and I was able to get quite an accurate view of what it would look like from the top down by taking the points, say, of the top of the tail here, projecting it down to the top of the tail here, and I knew that they matched up here. So you can use coordinates like that to try and pinpoint exactly where things go. The top of the horns here, I projected down to here, and you can see I projected from here across to there to get the exact position of the horns. Same with the back of the head here, you can see from there, and then working up from this position here. So front view can be rotated, and the side view and front view combined can make a top-down sketch if you're modeling something that is more complex, especially if it was maybe machinery or a complex piece of architecture or an organic shape like this little dragon. So see how you get along creating the different views from the initial thumbnails that you have created, putting measurements on where they're needed, and projecting your views across to create the other views so that when we bring these into Maya, we'll be able to model them up as accurately as possible.